It came to my family out of the blue. God knows how, God knows why.
I mean, if you went into a geriatric ward and you were in there for about 2 years, I mean, you'd kick the bucket, wouldn't you? Because you feel you've got nothing to live for.
Your mind completely rejects it and says, well, it's ridiculous, it couldn't possibly happen. Not to our children.
So if you're in a place like this, I mean you're living, really, aren't you? I mean, with the electric chairs we've got, we get around, we can... Well, we're all active, really.
These young people are intelligent. They're not mentally retarded. They're very sensitive and know exactly what's going on around them. And for young, intelligent people to be doomed to spend months and sometimes years in a ward with senile people is, to me, a disaster.
Morning at a special home in Bournemouth. The 17 boys here are victims of muscular dystrophy, one of the deadliest diseases amongst the young. It's inherited from the mother, and although the child may appear normal when born, by 3 the first signs can be diagnosed. By the age of 10, the child will be in a wheelchair. Thereafter, the muscles throughout the body grow progressively weaker, and the overwhelming majority of the victims will die before they reach 20. There is no known cure. The 17 boys at this home are an experiment to see whether life can be prolonged. Statistically, most of them should by now be dead. They themselves realise this.
Well, we don't try to hide anything at all of the position that the lads are in. Every one of them know perfectly well that he is in borrowed time. They all know this. They all know that they've stepped over their limit. And they're very proud about this. Hello, Tiger. How are you?
The 17 boys here are the lucky ones. There are 20,000 victims of muscular dystrophy in all its forms in this country. On Wednesday of this week, a private member's bill will go into committee in Parliament to press for a new deal for the handicapped in our society. This then is a report on the problems of Wednesday's children.
I sometimes think about the boys I knew when I was at school, which is more than 5 years ago, some muscular dystrophy. I don't know if they're still alive or not. And there must be thousands of boys all over this country that they've got nothing to live for, really.
Sometimes it's really agony to sit in your chair all day, you know. But you just have to put up with it. I'm not as bad as some of them, you know, but it's bad enough. But I don't complain, you know.
We're the tip of the iceberg, really. Because there's lots worse off than us.
Hey, what are you doing? Cutting the grass?
This special home has been going now for 3 years. Had it not been built, it's almost certain that these 17 teenage victims of the disease would now be dead.
What about growing a bit more sidewalls? Not more. Huh? Are you not? Oh, Dick, you would grow a lovely beard, sir. Eh? Won't you?
The superintendent at the home is Mr. Don Gillies.
One of the lads who's 21 now is getting very weak and finding it very difficult to move his electric chair. Now, if they want to do things, it may be that they move a hand from here over to here. It's going to take, a minute, perhaps, to do this. And then they will use this method of moving their hand by lifting it into their teeth, or putting their face down and catch the hand and throw it across to where they want, and then they pick up the thing they want and move it slowly back again. And this is they always find a way to do things.
Younger victims can be taught at special schools up to the age of 16, but after that, there is no place to go except home. The only state provision is a geriatric ward in a hospital. There are only 2 residential homes like this in the entire country, which cater for the boys in the last stages of their illness. They can provide just 40 places. Over the last year, over £250,000 has been set aside for research. The leading unit at Newcastle General Hospital is in the charge of Professor John Walton.
As yet, we have no means of preventing the disease from developing. Our hope must be, I think, in the future, to identify those females who are likely to pass the disease on to their sons, because if we can identify them, the chances are that most of them will decide not to have children, and the number of boys being born in the future will therefore diminish. The decision of the doctor is to tell the patient what the risks are. You tell a young woman, if she is shown to be a carrier, that if she has a boy, he will have a 50-50 chance of suffering from the disease, and if she has a daughter, then that daughter will have a 50-50 chance of being a carrier. The decision then as to whether she has a family is up to her.
Every week, a screening of potential carriers of the disease is held at Newcastle. In the past 6 years, they have tested 215 women, of which 61 have been confirmed as carriers. These otherwise would have unknowingly risked passing on the disease to their children. Here, the unit is testing the electrical energy generated in suspect muscle. It's one of 3 basic tests a potential carrier has to undergo before her doctor can see her.
We've now got the results of your tests, and I thought perhaps I should have you along and just tell you a little bit about what muscular dystrophy is, and then to tell you the results of the tests that you've had done. First of all, I know you had your brother who died when you were really quite young of this disease. Perhaps I should say that there are various forms of muscular dystrophy, and it seems that your brother had one of these forms, the most common form, which is called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This is the form that affects young boys, that weakens their muscles. The disease paralyzes their muscles, and gradually they get weaker and weaker, less able to walk, and eventually go off their feet. A number of these boys die of this condition, as you know, and as your brother did. And at present, unfortunately, we have no cure for this. Now, the test that you've had, first of all, you had a sample of blood taken from you, and we were looking in this for a certain enzyme that is released from muscle when it's damaged, and in you this enzyme was rather too high. And finally you had that small piece of muscle taken out, and we've looked at it under the microscope, and there are some fibers that are abnormal. Now, all this adds up together to mean that with probably about 75–80% certainty, you are in fact a carrier of muscular dystrophy.
So in a case like this, what would you advise me to do?
Well, this is very difficult. I can't make the decision for you. I can give you this information, and I can also tell you what many people decide when faced with this situation. As I say, you have a chance that 1 in 2 of your boys will have the disease, and 1 in 2 of your girls will have the chance of passing the disease on to their children. Many girls faced with this decide that they won't run the risk of having children that are affected with the distress that this causes everyone.
The effect upon the family may be catastrophic, particularly if one has more than one affected boy in a family. One finds so often that the parents devote themselves so fully to the care of these dystrophic boys that their family life suffers. Other unaffected children in the family may perforce be, to some extent at least, neglected. The philosophical effect upon the family of this condition is almost unbelievable at times.
Many mothers who have unknowingly passed on the disease to their children suffer from guilt. One is Mrs. Dawn Murrell.
When this child was born, there were the usual high hopes of the future for him. When it was found that he had muscular dystrophy, all those hopes were dashed to the ground. All of those hopes. And it was because of something in me. Certainly, I didn't know. But nevertheless, it was through me he had muscular dystrophy. One feels guilty that one has given one's son this dreadful disease. But one has to learn to live with this guilt.
What's the use of getting bitter about it? I mean, it's no good feeling sorry for yourself, I don't think. Because if we'd do that, we'd be miserable all day. But we like to have a joke and laugh. I'm quite satisfied the way I am at the moment. Got no complaints, really.
Another mother, Mrs. Margaret Fielding.
Both of my sons are now dead. Adrian died 2 years ago and Nigel 2 months ago. Adrian left school when he was 16 and came home, and he died 2 years later, and shortly after he died, Nigel left school and came home, and he was home for 2 years before he died.
The mums, when they first find out that their son is crippled, I think it really upsets them very badly, I think. But after a while, I think they just sort of grow to understand what it is and try the best for their son.
Hello, Roger.
Hello.
How are you this morning?
All right, thanks.
Oh, how's that toe?
It's all right.
Is it all right?
Yeah.
Did you sleep all right last night?
Yes, thanks.
You sure?
Yes.
Even if the screening of carriers could be totally effective, a limited number of children would still be born with muscular dystrophy. This is because in some cases the disease will leap generations and by mutation reappear in a family where it's lain dormant and forgotten for many years. The 17 boys at Bournemouth have gained time at a cost. This home was built 3 years ago for £80,000. There's been no medical breakthrough to account for the extension to the boys' lives. It's simply intensive nursing care, necessary where the slightest chill can cause death. The basic cost of each battery-powered wheelchair is £156, and to keep each boy costs £15 a week.
In the past, there have been many, many lads dying off 16 and 17. This is why the Shaftesbury Society felt a terrific need. Gordon Franklin felt that some of the lads who were leaving the schools, and then next thing he would hear, they had died. He felt that if they could have a place to keep them in together, that they would live longer. Now, this was his theory, and so therefore this place was built. And I think that what was then a theory has been put into practice, and the boys are living longer.
Outside the protected environment of the home, provisions made by the state for young men of this age are less satisfactory.
The parents, with all the goodwill in the world, it's a very, very difficult thing to handle a young man suffering from muscular dystrophy. This is very difficult because it means that in the morning, before you go to work, you've got to care for him, you've got to look after him. If he's too heavy for his mum to handle during the daytime, well then the trouble is that you're going to have this problem again when you go in at night. The parents will hold on to them as long as they can, because the only answer is the geriatric ward of a hospital.
I do know myself of one young boy who was living in a home where he shared a small room with an 80-year-old completely senile man. As the nursing was so very difficult, they couldn't, this boy was very heavy, it was very difficult for them to get him out of bed, and for days at a time he didn't get out of bed. So that he spent his entire 24 hours in this one small room with an old man. And I have heard, this I know to be true, but I have heard of many cases very similar.
The sponsor of Wednesday's private members' bill in Parliament is Alf Morris, Labour MP. His concern is with young handicapped people in geriatric wards.
We know that in Scotland there are 333 young chronically sick people in old people's wards. We don't know how many there are in England and Wales. And this again is very remarkable. I make the rough calculation that Scotland is about an 11th of Britain's population, and that therefore there must be upwards of 3,000 young chronically sick people who have been admitted to geriatric wards. And some of them feel, their parents feel, that they've just been shoveled away. Out of sight, out of mind.
At Bournemouth, the boys take an active interest in the outside. When the weather allows, they leave their enclosed world to visit theatres and cinemas. But for Alf Morris, the thousands who aren't so lucky are an unknown factor.
First of all, I'd like everyone to know the size of the problem, and details about numbers should be laid before Parliament. What I'd like to see is an improvement in the welfare and an enhancement of the dignity of disabled people. Any disabled man or woman, boy or girl, really wants to live at home, with friends, with family, and to have opportunities to be as normal as they can possibly be. For some young people, this is impossible. There ought to be special provision, where if they suffer from fatal illnesses, at least they can spend the last years of their life comfortably, without any avoidable pain or distress, and as far as possible happily with people of their own age.
For the 17 in the Shaftesbury home at Bournemouth, the advantages of sharing a fight for life are apparent.
If a lot of us weren't here, say we'd be home, but if say both parents have to work, you'd be stuck in the house on your own. And well, it must be very demoralising for a person in a chair or anything, just to stay in one room. Well, I think it's more of a confidence booster than anything else if we're all together.
Yeah, we think about them, of course we do. We feel concerned, and we think other people ought to be concerned. That there is people like us in Britain and all over the world. So why not build more places like this?
Some local authorities make direct grants to sufferers from muscular dystrophy, but there are regional inequalities which Wednesday's bill will try to settle.
There are other provisions about the facilities that should be made available by local authorities. You know, there are some good local authorities in this country, but there are also some very, very bad ones. There's one local authority, a well-known one. It's a seaside resort, and a very well-known seaside resort in Lancashire, which spends more on its end-of-season illuminations than it spends on disabled people. Now, I would say that that is a cause for very great concern.
I think they should build more places like this, but they're always talking about it and they never do anything. And it's no good talking if you can't back your words up. Places like this are working. I mean, our 17 boys here are proving it. I mean, what more proof can you want? So obviously this is the answer, the one and only answer. You can't get around it any other way, can you?
Oh.
I mean, being sent to hospitals in whatever you call it, wards.
You're trying to get the one geriatric.
Geriatric. I mean, even an ordinary human being would die with old people round him, coughing and spluttering all over the place, wouldn't they? I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? I mean, people lying on stretchers and being wheeled out dead and think, oh God, I wonder how long it's going to be before I'm that one on that stretcher.
Life at the Bournemouth home is routine, necessarily so.
Watch it, Dave.
The boys respond best to a fixed daily schedule, breakfast in bed, meals on the dot, and a day devoted to some play, some learning, and a great deal of discussion amongst the boys themselves about their illness. If disputes arise, they're settled by a jury of the boys themselves. Fines and light restrictions are imposed, not by the staff, but by the boys. Muscular dystrophy has no effect upon the mental intelligence of the victims, but as the muscles gradually weaken throughout the whole body, they will develop deformities, sometimes with remarkable speed, after they're fully confined to a wheelchair. Because of weakness, it's difficult to sit upright in the chair all the time. The child will lean to one side or the other, and this leads to the spine curving sideways. In others, the feet will turn inwards, or the knees will gradually twist at right angles to the body. Some will waste away to rake-like thinness. Many will grow terrifyingly heavy through lack of exercise. Despite all this, the boys at Bournemouth feel that they've proved themselves, that they've reached a fragile maturity. Again, Professor Walton.
Many of these children, however crippled they may be, get a great deal of pleasure out of life. And our efforts are certainly directed to help them to live as long as they humanly can.
Do you want any more? No.
They're not children. Once they've got to 16, they're young men. They have all the normal feelings and emotions of young men. They very much resent being talked about as children, although this is a normal sort of reaction to seeing anybody in a wheelchair, to make them feel that they're very much younger.
Doctors, parents and staff apart, The best advocates for the intensive care that residential homes like these can give are the boys themselves.
When I come here, I thought, oh God, I wonder how long I'll be here before I kick the bucket, you know. But then, because I didn't know what it was all about, you see, and Mr. Gillis explained to me, and I realised that I'll come here to live, not die, like I thought I was. Because my brother, you see, he died, and of course, when I come here, I thought, oh God, I'm going to go the same way.
A handicapped day school, and this woman said to me, Mum, that I'll be gone about 15. And I just sort of laughed with her, what rubbish she's talking about, you know. And I'm 21 now, so it can't be the case, so I'm quite happy and well, so I'll just carry on for another 10 years, I reckon.
I don't think any of us fear the possibility of death. I think it's sort of been wiped out as we're all living together. And as Ed can get to 21, and the old theory is that we wouldn't live, say, till we were 16, which is, you know, it's just proved wrong, so you could carry on indefinitely, really.
We have lost two. One, when he went home at Christmas last year, he went to a church service on Christmas morning, caught a chill, and in a few days, he was dead. The other went to Jersey. It was terribly hot weather during July, and he took a heart attack and died. But it didn't cause any of them to become depressed or sad. The only thing they said about Ian dying was that, isn't it strange that it's the nice guys that go?
Some people thought it would be more of us would die, but they were surprised that there were so many of us still living happily. I think we missed the boys at first, but we still remember them, but we don't feel all morbid about them.
I mean, of course we didn't expect them to die, but things like this happen. I mean, it hasn't made us think, oh, we're all going to die now, just because two of them had gone, you know. I think we're still just as, how can I put it, confident that we'll live on about a few more years, even more than that. As Ed said, 15 or 20. Could even be the oldest man in the world, for all I know.
One more day has been won at Bournemouth. It's been won by intensive care and guts, but the night brings special fears. The matron, Mrs. Gillies.
There's just that sort of fear of what's going to happen when they go to bed at night, say they need help during the night, and they don't want to be alone. And so we point out to them that these microphones have been put into the bedrooms, and that even if they breathe deeply, the microphone takes up the sound. The night nurse is in the duty room, and someone is there immediately when the boy needs help.
Well, of course, I've come across a lot of people who feel that there is no right to keep people living if they are not going to contribute to the social community. But to everybody, life is sweet. And these fellas are perfectly happy. Why should they be limited in their life because of this? I think that the lad has a right to live as long as it's possible.
You know, in Britain today, we hear far more about the complaints of the strong and the affluent. We hear far more about the problems of people who find it difficult to diet or to park their second car than we do about the problems of young people suffering from complaints like muscular dystrophy. If the public knew the size of the problem, if they knew what it was like to find oneself in the position of being very grievously disabled, I think we'd hear far less of the complaints of the strong and the affluent, and we'd be doing far more to help people who are disabled and who need our compassion and who need our support.
Right.
Good night. Good night, Laurie.
Night, Rog.
Good night.
Good night, Dick. Good night, Rog.
Good night. Good night.
We're all happy, you see. We all know what's wrong with us. I mean, if we weren't told, we'd all sit thinking, I wonder who's going to die next, and things like that. But we know what's wrong with us. And as Roger said, when people come here, they feel glad that they're coming in and seeing us happy. And I think we're doing a job just as much as people in the outside world, because when they come in here, they feel that we've given something to them, and that makes us feel proud as well.